Yeah, so I'm with the Mississippi Blues Trail, and want to talk about interpretation of juke joints and other African-American night spots with larger clubs, for instance. On the trail, what I'm going to talk about, look at these venues, talk about how the trail formed. I'm sure a lot of people are interested. We've had this amazing amount of interpretation, a lot of money has gone into this, and a lot of organizations from other states have looked to us and say, how did you do it? So touch on that, and we can discuss that later. I'm sure a lot of people are very interested in how we were able to put up so many markers, both for the Blues Trail, also for the Country Music Trail. We have something also called the Freedom Trail. The latter two use the model of the Blues Trail, the same administration as well. And I'll touch upon some of the issues about who benefits from this, right? That we have this new wave of cultural tourism in Mississippi centered around the blues, and our license plate now features B.B. King. If you drive into the state, it says, "Welcome to Mississippi, the birthplace of American music," which is contentious but not provable, of course. But we haven't had any fights with Memphis about that or anything so far. So there's a lot of issues in marking these places. I mean, this image, I picked this one because you have this iconic, maybe I've all seen pictures of Po Monkeys before, but Po Monkeys is often used to sort of as this juke joint out in the middle of a cotton field run by this very interesting character named Po Monkey. I actually helped with that process, and I worked on a book called Mississippi State of Blues, a large format a coffee table book, and we have a picture of Po Monkeys on the cover of it. As a sociologist, I was a little divided. I should say, as a background, I'm a sociologist and also somebody who works with these issues of working for the tourism division of the state. So I'm aware of some of the potential problems with that, being involved in the process of documentation, for the purposes of making money. The purposes of the Blues Trail are for education, historical documentation, but it's also part of, selling Mississippi to tourists, right? Getting more people to visit. And so there's a lot of problems with that, right? If you put this on the map and tell people where it is, it changes the dynamic of the place, right? And it's no longer the authentic place it once was. Though we're not the only force involved with that process. So, but I think we can, very positively, we can talk about that with all of these efforts. It's helping us, helping to reshape our understandings of these areas, right? These things that people took for granted or are often located in small places that urbanites don't know anything about. But anyways, I'm going to talk about the basics of the Blues Trail. Right now, this started in 2006. We now have 189 markers. It's operated by the Mississippi Development Agency through Visit Mississippi. We have a board called the Mississippi Blues Commission, appointees from the governor. The actual work is conducted by myself and Jim O'Neill, who is the founder of Living Blues magazine, and we work on per contract basis with something called Hammonds and Associates, an advertising firm. It's more than an advertising firm. They do a lot of very interesting cultural work. In Greenwood, Mississippi, where I reside, they also have done the design of the markers for the Country Music Trail and for the Civil Rights Trail, the Freedom Trail. The funding for this trail, the Blues Trail, is that we have a deal. I don't know the specifics of it because I don't know the budget for paying people at tourism or advertising, but the basic idea is that when somebody comes out and wanted, or for a long time, when somebody wanted to put up a marker, if we approved of them having a marker, the community would have to come up with about half that money. It was initially about $4,000 or $5,000. I think it's closer to 10 now. I don't know what the breakdown is on that. I think labor, not my labor, unfortunately. I've got a little bit more money over the last 10 years, but anyway, so the idea is the communities buy in. right? So it's not the state saying, we're going to put a marker here. There's a lot of collaboration with the communities, and one of the interesting things is, as the Mississippi Blues Trail has developed, it's become kind of a hot trend or offer within the Convention and Visitor Bureau professionals, right? That they see, oh, Jackson has this many, or Clarksdale has 10, we want one, right? So it's kind of become a sense of validation in the professional tourism community, right? And anyways, we have, like I said, 189. Most of them are in Mississippi here. You can see that we've got one in where the Faraday, Louisiana. I'm not sure if it was that thing. Is it that one? Somewhere down there across from Natchez, Faraday. We've got a couple in Muscle Shoals, a couple in Memphis. We don't have one in southern Louisiana, unfortunately. But we also have, if we look at the reach of it, we got additional, oh, I forgot to say that the communities pay half, and a lot of the other money was NEH and Mississippi Highway funds. And then there's also the salaries of the people at tourism. We additionally got some NEH funding to expand the Blues Trail to Florida, Bradfordsville, Grafton, Wisconsin, where the Paramount label was, Chicago, the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles, Rochester, New York, where Son House lived for many years, and Maine, which is that there's a logic about placing these markers that they reflect the impact of Mississippi blues. There's a 25-year historical criteria. We probably would have rather had one in Lafayette than in Maine, but it had a lot to do with the lobbying on the side of the communities. In that case, there was a blues festival that had been there for a long time. We also have them in Cahors, France, where there's been a festival for a long time, and Notat in Norway, which is the home of one of the largest blues festivals in Europe. So we're also in the process of creating a mobile marker, which is going to be for Europe, right? So we can move it around to different festivals. It's not very easy to put up a big sign, say in London, at the site of where the Stones played or whatever. Big cities generally don't want something that big on the sidewalk, right? So we have, everything is on the web, and we have a great app, which I encourage people to, you can buy it from, no, it's free. We have a free app, and you can create itineraries, look up a timeline, people, there are 15 videos that Robert Gordon from Memphis, who did a great Stax movie, Muddy Waters film, the recent William F. Buckley, Gore Vidal film. We've got Gore Vidal on the Blues Trail as well. Not really. But anyways, the idea, we have a website, and this Blues Trail has allowed us to, allow people to see the whole of it, right? I think oftentimes with the state puts up the historic markers, they've been doing it for so many years, I think there's some difficulty in actually knowing where they all are. I don't know if there's a website which tracks, we have somebody from that agency here. But I think it's often private people who are interested in historic markers that catalog all this. In our case, we have the full text of the markers and an interactive map online. And there's not actually a trail, I should say, it's just a bunch of markers. So that's, people ask, how do we do the trail? If you look back at those maps, there's not really a trail. So there's not a linear one anyways. And the idea, of course, for economic gain is that if you have that many places to visit, then you're probably going to spend a lot more money in hotels and meals and rental cars and things like that. Well, how did the Blues Trail got going in the early 2000s in the wake of a Clinton-era Millennium Trail project, which never took off, but it caused some people to get together to talk about it. And it really took off after 2003. That was the year of the blues, and we all remember Martin Scorsese had a film series. He got a bunch of directors. It didn't do very well. That everybody forgot about it that week. But anyways, Mississippi declared it to be the year of the blues. Congress declared it the year of the blues, a big push from PBS. Sony, BMG, the Scorsese people. But anyways, it pushed to the forefront this idea of blues, right? And Mississippi was kind of lagging behind, I think, our neighbors. That, you know, we saw the development of Beale Street early in the 90s, the development, they tore down the Stax studios and then rebuilt it as a tourist spot. Louisiana, of course, you know, the marketing of music is central to, right, tourism efforts. Of course, you know, tourism is central to the economy. I know of New Orleans, I don't know. Here, I presume it's a pretty big thing here as well. Coming down to go to the dance halls or to experience that culture. But anyways, the actual project came about through around 2003 or 4. I started working with the B.B. King Museum, which was a $15 million project in Indianola. The museum ended up going up in 2008, but one of the interesting things that we addressed was that Indianola is sort of in the middle western part of the state, over 2 hours from Memphis, over about an hour and a half from Jackson, an hour from an interstate. So it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, relatively speaking. Right? And so one of the things that we wanted to do was to put up some markers which would make a path, a trail of sorts, you know, so that you have a bunch of other sites between, you know, a lot of people drive through Mississippi after they've been in Memphis and going to New Orleans, and so we're looking at how do we get people to go to these areas. Everybody knows that the blues is from Mississippi, but they don't know where to go, right? It's generally viewed as something that was in Mississippi, right? Robert Johnson, what, 75 years ago or more, Muddy Waters was there until the early 40s, right? And people didn't really have that much of a notion that there's that much to see, just to know that it was there. But in any case, so with the B.B. King Museum, we had a team together, right? We had a lot of money, and so we were working with NEH consultants. And so in addition to trying to put the museum together, we decided, you know, let's use this team we've got, you know, the grant writers and researchers to write a grant for a blues trail. And before we did that, these went up very early on. And as you see here, it says Mississippi Delta Blues Trail. Club Ebony is one of the best known juke joints in the state since 1945. People have played there. Well, 2 of these markers went up in Indianola, and then by 2006, our grant had come through for 9 markers to go up in 4 adjacent counties in Mississippi, all of which had a history of promoting blues. And anyways, so we first went up in 2006. The first 9 were successful, and eventually this one was replaced. I want to show you what the markers look like. There's a couple differences. We now call it a nightclub and not a juke joint. Club Ebony is a club that could hold 500 people. It was not a juke joint. Juke joints are generally a lot smaller than that, a little more ramshackle. This was a very nice club, and I think the other one said 1945. This one says after the end of World War II. Adds in the fact that there was a previous nightclub that preceded it on an adjacent street. But one of the unique, so this is more text, and the text is more correct. I didn't help write the preliminary ones, by the way. Well, we wouldn't have had the juke joint word on there. This is what the backside of our markers look like, right? So if we think about a typical metal sign with the raised lettering, a typical state marker has 40 words on it. the same on each side, which you can't read when you're driving 70 miles an hour down the road, but anyways, right, that you don't have a whole lot of interpretation. And what was kind of novel about what we did was said, well, why don't we print the backside flat at the foundry and then use a big piece of vinyl, and we have a 500-word essay on the side. We utilized that top area to put a photograph in. That's B.B. King at the Club Ebony. Indianola is where he grew up, or at least from the age of about 15 to 20, where he calls it his hometown. It's where he got married, had a job as a tractor driver, began singing gospel and playing blues on the street corners. But the great thing is that not only we can have that much written interpretation, but also all these great images, right? So that's essentially what our markers look like. I want to show some other pictures of what the Club Ebony looks like. This is from our book. Ken Murphy is the photographer. He's a kind of architectural photographer. So we have a wonderful tin roof with neon up in the ceiling. The building was used pretty regularly up through the 90s on the Chitlin circuit, right? That it was a club that BB played at, Bobby Bland, Johnny Taylor. It's declined considerably as the Chitlin circuit has moved towards civic centers. They have big shows now. You've probably seen the Blues Is All Right tour, probably comes through here somewhere, and it'll be at the Civic Center, and there'll be 5 popular soul blues artists, and it's like $45. You can bring in your own liquor and food, but it's been kind of at the expense of these clubs, right? That the people organizing these tours, they find it probably easier just to work with, there's so many civic centers, you can guarantee it, the electricity is going to work, and they have security guards, they have places that sell sodas and things like that. So there's been kind of a rationalizing of that market, and which has left a lot of these larger clubs behind. The idea of going and seeing one group with, say, a local band opening up is not something you see very often. It's interesting, the Club Ebony was private. B.B. King married the daughter, his second wife was the daughter of the owner of the Club Ebony, and he bought it from her, he bought it from the owner from the late 70s, early 70s until sometime in the 2000s. I don't know what he paid for it, but he subsequently donated it to the B.B. King Museum, which is about 200 yards away on the other side of the tracks. And in the museum, we actually have an interpretation of juke joints. That's part of the narrative of looking at what was the secular culture that B.B. King would have experienced in Indianola. So there's a little bit of history from Club Ebony and its predecessor. With the Blues Trail, we ended up interpreting quite a few venues among the various things that we look at. There's Club Ebony's at the top, but why do we look at clubs on the Blues Trail? The Blues Trail is not just clubs by any means. It's not called the Juke Joint Trail, but when we got together, we initially decided to be 120 after that initial grant. Half of them had to be outside of the Delta, and the first 50 picks were, okay, well, we gotta have Muddy Waters, we gotta have Howlin' Wolf, we gotta have Charlie Patton, and so we had about 50 of those. And then with the NEH money, one of the stipulations was that the trail would have to address humanities themes, which was kind of vague what that meant, but the things that we looked at were, in the end, were transportation. So there's markers for Highway 61 and for trains, historic sites such as Dockery Plantation. There's some others that address cotton, radio, record companies like Malaco Records, Ace Records, issues about civil rights, religion in the blues, other things like hot tamales in the blues. We go like that in Rosedale, Parchman Farm, and in addition to clubs and also historic strips. So like there would be the the Beale Street of these various smaller towns. So venues became an important thing, but there just simply weren't that many of them around. I don't know what the number of operating dance halls here is in Louisiana or Texas is, but in Louisiana and Mississippi, it's not a huge number. And the ones that we've put a marker for that are still around, fortunately we haven't had any die out since we put the marker out. Club Ebony, as I said, it's not used very often anymore, but they still do have shows there. It's now owned by the museum, and they keep it up, and we have tourist groups can go there. The Blue Front Cafe in Bentonia, Reds in Clarksdale, Co Monkeys in Merigold. I'm going to show pictures of all these in a second. 100 Men Club, Bradfordsville Blues Club in Florida. And then there's a couple other places, buildings that are still around, which occasionally have music, but are not really music venues. The Alamo Theater was a movie theater that had talent shows in Jackson, and the Elks Lodge in Greenwood, which a big part of the Chitlin circuit in Mississippi was using fraternal organizations, right? That the Elks Club made money, or the other clubs. Fraternal organizations would make money by booking bands. I don't believe any of them really do that anymore. But let me just go over some of the individual places. The Blue Front Cafe in Bentonia has been around since the late 40s. It was a cafe started by the Holmes family. Their son Jimmy Duck Holmes is a bluesman. This is the place where Skip James is from. There's a very, David Evans talks about a distinctive Bentonia style of blues, the sort of eerie style, and Duck Holmes is very consciously he's very conscious about preserving that tradition. He plays in that tradition. He's not a master of it the way, say, Skip James was, but he learned it, you know, from local people, and has a very strong, is very conscious about the role of this place. But it's still a place where you can go drink beer and smoke cigarettes and have fun. And it's not a very active venue. Bentonia is a very small place. That's Jimmy right there. He's now recorded about 5 albums. I'm actually going to be interviewing him at the Jazz Fest, Sunday, April 24th. He's very eloquent in talking about the tradition. I think he retired. He worked for the school system somehow or another. So he's retired, and I think has a source of income. He can't be making any money off of it. And he sells Coca-Colas for $1 and sells cigarettes and chips, and has a festival once a year. But this is an inside of the place. It was a cafe. It no longer really serves food, just potato chips and things like that. And here's the marker in front of the Blue Front Cafe. We have to negotiate. I think sometimes we're ruining the iconic images because it's hard to take a picture, right? People are always avoiding taking pictures of other tourists, right, for one. And the marker kind of suggests, like, I'm not the first person that was here. That's actually H.C. Porter, an artist from Vicksburg, who did a book of blues photographs. Let's see. Reds in Clarksdale. Reds has become a really famous place in Clarksdale. It's doesn't look like, well, it has the blues club on the outside, but a lot of people drive by it. A lot of tourists are afraid to go in there because it's kind of rough looking. It's just over the tracks from the downtown area of Clarksdale, on Martin Luther King and Sunflower Avenue. But you can often find people milling about on the streets. Red kind of relishes its kind of dangerous reputation and often makes comparisons with a club that's 100 yards away, the Ground Zero Blues Club, which is owned by Morgan Freeman, which is kind of a faux juke joint, right? They had this big building which was used for other purposes, and then there's a film in which one of the owners, Bill Luckett, is talking about, well, we looked at Bernie Adams' book Juke Joint, and so we decided that we would get mismatched furniture and Christmas lights, and kind of weird that he was talking about it so publicly, how they decided to fake it. But they also have this weird thing of you can write on the walls, which I don't think is something that most people, you know, that may happen, but it's, you know, there's of course all those kind of restaurants where that's like a fun thing to do, to stick things in the ceiling or right on the walls. But that became also part of it, right? That you can disrespect the structure, which not Reds. You can probably write on the walls of Reds, but it's so dark you wouldn't notice it in there. It's also a place famous for buckets of water on the tables, and he's always raising money to replace the roof. But I think he kind of likes the idea that it leaks a bit. Bathrooms are pretty shady as well. That's Red. And Red is kind of a belligerent guy. He has sort of a front. I think he actually worked as installing carpet. One of his sons is a state legislator. So I think he's a lot more of a middle-class guy than he lets on. You know, he has this sort of rough and tumble act he puts on. And as I said, he's often making these comparisons between his place, the real place, and Ground Zero, that movie star place down the road. And he kind of makes fun of people being afraid to come over to his place. One of the most interesting things about Reds is I remember going there, I guess in the early 90s, to see Big Jack Johnson and other artists playing there, and it was at that point, most of the audience was African American. Over the years now, Reds has become very mixed, but actually mostly predominantly tourists, so it depends on what season of the year it is, right? If it's February, you're more likely to see an African American crowd, and they're never a very large one though. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But, we don't actually have a marker for Reds, but Big Jack Johnson, who was the greatest bluesman in Clarksdale in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, into the 2000s, that was his home club. So when we put up a marker for Big Jack, we decided to put it up at Reds, right? And it's also plays into local tourism. Big Jack lived in a neighborhood. We generally don't put up markers in the middle of neighborhoods. So there is one in Grenada, Mississippi for Magic Slim. Which was very interesting. And it's you know, other people in Clarksdale were born there. Sam Cooke, Ike Turner. You know, they are not. The markers are not at their homes because generally, probably for reasons that the areas are not deemed to be tourist friendly, right? Or there's also privacy issues, but there's a desire oftentimes to move markers to very visible areas in the downtown, but there's also some political issues there. Another place in Jackson is the Queen of Hearts, an urban lounge. The Queen of Hearts has been around since the early 70s. See the marker there in that photograph? Okay, here's the interior of the club. It's a very colorful place, you know, sort of a time machine back to the 70s. There's a little, to the left of the jukebox is a little tiny stage which has a big railing in front of it, oddly. I'm not sure why it's there. I've never asked them about it. But they have music on the weekends. There's usually not too much of a crowd. I don't know if the musicians make anything because I think it's like a place where musicians like to go to play. That's Chellie B. Lewis. It used to be a major hangout back in the days when when Malaco Records out of Jackson, which was the biggest soul blues label, when it was really in full force in the 70s and 80s, you know, Little Milton might hang out here, Johnny Taylor, ZZ Hill, locals including Sam Myers, who of course became a big Texas artist after he got Anson Funderburg took him from here to Texas and probably improved his life considerably, I think. You know, Sam was actually living upstairs and not in the best of conditions. But so Chellie B, I think he owns a number of other buildings, and this is sort of his club. Right? I can't imagine that he makes too much money, though. It's nice to look at. Am I getting that? There. He does make a lot of money, I think, operating largely as a takeout fish place. Right? So you see a lot of people that come in, pick up food to go, and don't really pay too much attention to the band. Right? And Chellie B's often back there in the kitchen. Right? So that's a way that it survived. It's sort of a restaurant where you might come in to eat. Generally speaking, people don't eat there if they come, they don't come there just for the food, as far as I've seen. There's the dedication with some of the local musicians. King Edward, who's actually from here, King Edward Antoine, and his brother Nolan Struck came up around Lafayette, but King Edward's been in Jackson that's him with the bowler hat on. He still can pull out some French. He's always surprised that anybody knows anything about him. But there's Po Monkeys again, this iconic place in just north of Cleveland, Mississippi, and that's Willie Po Monkey Seaberry operates it. He is a farmer. He farms the cotton on the property right around it. He's not owned the farm, but he also lives in the back of this place, and it's open on Thursday nights, and it's a discotheque, mostly. It's been a discotheque since the 60s. I don't know that there's any tradition of him ever putting on live bands. And this has created kind of an issue with the development of cultural tourism. People want to see a band in a juke joint, and so recently, people they want to come down and film a band playing in a juke joint. Sometimes film companies will hire a band and pay Po Monkey a couple $100, and then try to recruit people. It's often very difficult, probably for the filmmakers, to recruit the people they'd like to see dancing, right? The African Americans. Usually a bunch of college students come over, so it becomes kind of an odd thing for the, for the filmmakers, for other people who are in search of the authentic experience. But it's a very authentic experience, I think, on Thursday nights when you go there, and they're playing not quite hip hop, but mostly Southern soul and R&B, and when there's not some tourism-y kind of event going on, it's a packed place where people are dancing, right? So it actually is a juke joint in the sense that people are there to relax, to dance. He used to have strippers there on Monday nights, but I think now that there's a lot more publicity, he doesn't do that anymore. No loud. Well, it's interesting that means loud music. It's not loud music, it's rap music, I think. And that's something which I think is very interesting if we look at the development of juke joints. Maybe you think about that there's generally, particularly among musicians, a very strong dislike of rap music, which carries a social component. It's not just a musical one, but I think you can see that there's a lot of different forms of music which were more or less acceptable. Like you can play Motown, you can play Muddy Waters, you can play Tyrone Davis, 70s music, but there's a cutoff, like you don't play hip hop, right? And so at the juke joints, it is, I wouldn't say it's rooted in the past necessarily, because there's still a lot of contemporary Southern soul artists who get played at these type of places.
There is a difference between hip hop and rap. Yeah. So,
well, yeah, exactly, yeah. But among the proprietors who are 70 years old, they, you see the different signifiers, no hats turned to the side, no pants pulled down, right? So, and they call these places like grown folks lounges, right? Grown folks mean you act respectable, you don't have your pants hanging off, right? And so there's that, and that's an interesting issue for the survival, I think, of the juke joints, right? If you don't want that, well, hip hop started in the 70s, right? So you're starting, and maybe it's the case that people who were hip hop fans back then are now grown folks that don't want to be messing around with the current forms of it, right? What's that? Grown folks? Grown, G-R-O-W-N. You see that a lot as a signifier for, this is for adults, don't come in here.
30 and older.
30 and older, right? Yeah, exactly. Right. So that's, and you see that in the Delta often, like grown folks lounge, right? Which means this is, you kids go over there, older people, you can be here, you don't have to, be around the young people with all those implications, right? Of whatever, old people always think young people are rude and that their music's too loud and whatever. But anyways, you can see he's saying there, all pictures taken $5. There's actually somewhere you can put money in if you're not there. Let's see what else is here. This is it's an incredible place, right? From a folk art perspective. He has all these monkeys hanging from the ceiling, photographs, and you can bring stuff in, but it pretty much developed relatively organically. He's also tends to, particularly if there's more tourists there, he'll switch outfits. He has like a lot of very colorful suits, and he'll change suits 5 times in a evening, and he also has some pretty X-rated jokes, like Jack in the Boxes, where things pop out of them that are not dolls. I'll just say that. You know, there's I'm not going to go into that too much, but he does some things which are pretty shocking, right? From
entertainment.
Yeah. So when the people from Boston come down there, they don't know quite what to think about that. But he tends not to do that when there's. If it's a crowd of mostly African Americans, he tends to be a little bit less of a character, I guess. He's not playing the role. He's more likely to be kind of grumpy or just sort of watching people. If it's tourists, he seems to be more acting the part. Anyways, it's a pretty fascinating place. There's one of him in one of his fancy suits. And he's been doing this for like I said, about over nearly 50 years. It's kind of hard to.
How old is he?
In his 70s. Unfortunately, all the guys that are running these clubs are in their 70s, and there's rarely ever like a son around who would seem to be the obvious heir. Said with Red, there is definitely there are sons who might take it over, but I mean, how do he seems to have made his money. He probably bought his house. He probably is getting Social Security. He can afford to run a club and not make very much money. Now, Monkey, on the other hand, is charging $5 to get in on Thursday nights. He probably doesn't pay any rent, and he may be bringing in, sometimes $1,000 on a Thursday night because he's selling a lot of beer. There used to be more vice there, but he only really does it on Thursday night. And if he rents it out, say to tourists, then he gets, I don't know, $500 plus gets to sell beer. So, Hoboke's pretty, got a thing going. He still does farm into his 70s, but this is, not just a hobby, but it's definitely, he's making a very good living. I mean, relatively speaking, if you consider that he's not paying rent, right?
You ever ask him why he calls it Monkey?
I'm not sure why he calls it Monkey. That's his brother. I can't remember what his brother's name. It was something else, Monkey. But that term Monkey, I'm not sure. You can find it in other places. There's actually a juke joint in eastern Maryland, Maryland Eastern Shore, in a place called Lamont's in Monkey, Maryland. I don't know what the etymology of that is. But and then this place is a dance hall of sorts, except this is on the coast. It's an African-American place called the 100 Men Hall. It was a benevolent society. I don't think it was necessarily built as a dance hall, but like a lot of benevolent societies, with the rise of Social Security and other things like that, their original purpose, as a burial society declined. And in tandem with the relative decline of the Elks and all those other kinds of organizations, right? That people tend not to belong to those kind of organizations anymore for the last 30 or 40 years. Right? Well, most of them have been pretty well decimated, but it was the Benevolent Society in Bay St. Louis, which is just east of New Orleans, and it became an important venue on the Chitlin circuit in the post-war era, post-World War II era. We don't really know what was going on before that. They may have had some concerts, but it became a full-fledged joint. We could see Big Joe Turner, Ray Charles. It was that large.
Deacon John also.
Deacon John, yes. Deacon John was at the opening of it. So you had all the touring circuit. I guess the New Orleans artists would come all the way out. Maybe I don't know if they go to East Texas or not, but they would certainly go to Florida. Most of those artists that were booked by Stovall, is that the right name of the person who booked them? There was a circuit that went along the coast, and they would also come up and play at fraternity parties in Mississippi. I don't know how much New Orleans artists went above Jackson, but it was an important stop on that circuit, and Deacon John remembers it very well. But this place was, you probably know what that means, right? So it was slated for destruction after Katrina had been serving as a disabled veterans organization or something. It had nothing to do with music after sometime in the 70s. A couple from California bought it and restored it, formed a nonprofit, and a Mississippi Blues Trail marker was part of the dedication, right? Part of the validation of it, bringing over Deacon John and other artists who played there. And it's turned into a venue that's open, I think, once a month. They have concerts there. You know, but you can see now this, the Blues Trail serving as sort of a validation of sorts, right? We have an important place, we want a marker. I don't know if Holmes wanted a marker or not, but you know, a lot of other places, with the Hollywood Cafe in Tunica, which is, what's that song, Walking to Memphis, he talks about the Hollywood Cafe in there, and which is not really a bluesy reference exactly, but they wanted one. So we have an issue of oftentimes communities are looking for, we want a marker, can we have a marker? Sometimes we can do it, sometimes we can't. Like, we can't put one up in front of Morgan Freeman's club, it's not old enough. But we can put one nearby that talks about cultural tourism and things like that. Right? So we have a lot of flexibility for interpreting things. Just want to quickly just address some of the issues I've already talked about. Am I going backwards? The batteries are going. Oh, there's Bradfordsville. There. Oh, sorry. There was one in Bradfordsville, Florida, which I don't know very much about that, but a very interesting venue. Okay. But that's obviously an older kind of a bunker type joint. That's a seating area out back. That's not a hard structure. That's a very good article by Richard Grant on Al Jazeera about the cultural tourism. So it's probably about to disappear from the internet since Al Jazeera no longer exists. So basically stopped. But anyways, you can see that at Bentonia, it's been that place has been used in many films over the years. When Japanese would come, if they wanted a real blues environment or background, they would film there. In recent years, the Yazoo County Tourism has been underwriting a festival that Jimmy heads, and Jimmy runs it. It's not that people have taken over, but part of the wave that spurred the Blues Trail has been local communities are starting to put on municipal festivals. Right? So aiding with how to get people to come here. Well, let's put on a festival. Let's get a blues marker. Let's put on a festival. What other kind of events can we put on that tap into this imagined market of blues tourists? He said, Po Monkeys, this is an example of the Delta State, the Delta Center for Culture and Learning at the bottom. You can see that they're advertising real Delta blues and a real Delta Juke. And they'll argue that J-O-K is the authentic way to spell it. And that's, and they're working with Cathead, which is a store in Clarksdale, which is a clearinghouse of information. I'll wrap it up right now. And they also, when Dollar General is putting headquarters in the Delta, they bring them by to educate them about the community. Right? So they're commodifying it, but also trying to incorporate this is official cultural heritage now. Oh, and then here, we want to talk, I don't think they saw this issue of Garden and Gun, but my girlfriend was like, threw it down, and we weren't subscribers. We should vow to never look at it again because of the, this juxtaposition of, hey, let's get some shabby looking buildings and some beautiful models. So, so it's been an interesting process.